Oh, that's, yeah. We'll take these and put them back.
Keep those in case more people
Oh,
come.
yeah, that's a good idea. Well, I want to welcome you to our second session on aging. And this one is dealing with what I call loss of kingdom, which is one of the big issues in retirement. And I think it's one of the big issues in aging. The fact that at some point in our life, we give up our career of whatever it was, whether it was outside the home or maybe even within the home doing something, since people are working at home now. And I always remember the day that my physician at Kaiser told me that he had to retire because he was turning 65 that year. And Kaiser makes the physicians retire. And that was a big thing for him. And when the young physicians go to Kaiser at 30 or 35 and sign on, they don't even give that a thought, that when they're 65, they're going to have to leave. And some want to leave and some don't. And so it's a struggle. One of the big issues we have is defining ourselves. Who am I? Now, if I'm going to define myself and explain to a stranger, I generally would start off by saying, well, I'm a retired pastor and I live in Redlands, California, and so forth. But what I want to do in order to separate my job from myself is to look at being versus doing. Can I introduce myself solely on the basis of who I am as a person, not what I do? Now it becomes a struggle. What do you say to a stranger? So I have spent some time thinking about that, and I have written out who I am. And I tried to do it without coming into doing, but I'm afraid I failed. And I'm the first to admit it. But it starts out well. So if you take a look at this sheet, and I'm going to let you read it. I'm not going to read it myself. I might have a hard time reading it. But just go ahead and read that through. Oh, yeah, that would be great. Yeah. Oh, I never thought of that here. Yes, that's a very good idea.
Just for the benefit of people on the live stream, I'm going to read this because they won't get the handout because we're recording it as well. But you can follow along. Craig writes, "Who am I? I am an 83-year-old man married to the same woman for almost 59 years. The first time that I saw her, before we had even spoken a word, I knew that was the girl that I was going to marry. Even after all these years, I can say that I love her more than life itself. I am the father of 2 children who are at universities where they teach and do research in different fields. I am a man of faith, not that I have attained, for faith is a gift of God, not a work of attainment. My faith was born in the crucible of tragedy when at the age of 14, I lost my father. He was only 43 when he dropped dead. That loss also drove me to adopt a lifestyle that was different than my father's. I decided to never drink, never smoke, eat healthy, always exercise, and to develop a lifelong athleticism that lasts even until today. I have ridden my bicycle across the width and length of America and on 3 continents. I have won 948 medals since I started competing in swimming when I was 72. In 2021, I was 5th in the nation in the 200-yard butterfly. At the age of 11, I discovered the joys of bird watching, and it became a lifelong interest. We went on our first date when I was 21 and Barbara was 19. I took her bird watching at the local marsh. She fell in love with bird watching and then me, in that order. Now we have gone bird watching on every continent except Antarctica. Just last week, we returned from bird watching in Texas, where I also swam in the Texas State Championships. I have lived from one century to another. I remember President Franklin Roosevelt's funeral train and seeing people dancing in the street when World War II ended. I shook the hand of President Eisenhower, President Nixon, and the Premier of France. I can't remember his name. He was some French guy. Yes, those are the things that I've done, but they are expressions of who I am. I am still striving toward the goal for my life that I set for myself at age 14, to leave the world a better place for my having passed through it. Thanks.
So, I wrote that during the middle of the night. I suffer from age-related insomnia, as many of you do. And so like this morning, I was up at 2:15 and working at the computer until 3:45, and that's when I write those things. But there is this divide between what we do and what we are that is essential to define. Because when we can make this definition, then we are suddenly cut free from the trap of having to define ourselves by what we do. And when I was a pastor, I knew better, I learned better than to define myself as being a pastor. Being a pastor was not who I am. I am me. I am Craig Walker. I am a child of God, but I am myself. And I can go on with life without being a pastor. Or it could be any career. And the more educated you are and the higher trained, the harder it is to give up your kingdom. But when you make this definition between who you are and what you do, suddenly it becomes possible to give up your kingdom. Now we have with us Kirk Howard. Kirk, just raise your hand. Dr. Kirk Howard has injured his neck. I don't want him to move too much here, but he's going to be talking to us in a bit here. Kirk and I have ridden our bicycles together for more than 40 years. I think 46 years now. I mean, I would go down to his house and knock on the door, and his wife would answer, and I would say, "Can Kirk come out and play?" I mean, that's how it was. We rode our bikes together almost every day. And in Australia, we started, the first trip was in 2005, and we've had more than a dozen trips. The last was in November to Australia. One day we were riding in Palm Springs, and it was kind of a hot day, and the trail made a corner there, and there was some shade, and there were a couple benches, so we stopped to rest and try to cool off. And here was this man sitting on the bench, and he was the most miserable-looking creature that you'd ever saw in your life. And of course, we started talking to him, and the whole problem was that just 9 months ago, he had retired. You remember that, Kirk? Yep. And he had nothing to say that was good because he had retired, he had nowhere to go, he had nothing to do, and he could not deal with it. And his problem was that he defined himself on the basis of what he did rather than who he was. So if we can start to look at that today, we can make some progress. And the way we're going to proceed is I'm going to talk for 15 or 20 minutes, and then we have 3 speakers who are going to talk for 3 or 4 minutes each, and that'll leave about half the time then for you to talk or ask questions of any of us. And when the speakers come, I'm going to have them finish by sitting up here on the front, and then they can easily ask any questions that would be directed to them. Well, what is loss of kingdom? I don't really know any definition, so I just wrote out this, the loss that a retiree feels when he or she ends active employment. It might not even be employment. It might be the thing that you did for so many years that kept you occupied, and now you have given it up and someone else is doing it. But when that happens, then it affects the concept of who we are. if we have defined ourselves by that job. It affects social interactions and relationships, our social standing. If you were a judge and then suddenly you retired, you're not a judge anymore, that's a pretty big adjustment. No one's calling you your honor anymore, not even your wife. And when I found out that I was related to King Louis XIV in France, I decided that I'd have my wife call me Your Highness, but she wouldn't go for that. It affects our social standing in the community, our use of time. It can affect our emotional stability, our self-concept. Am I still useful? Am I still worthwhile? Is there still some contribution that I can make? And this is one of the problems that we as older folks have, is trying to wrestle with this idea, are we still useful? And with some, it may have a financial impact, like my neighbor. My neighbor and his wife retired, and then, they found out they really didn't have enough money to live on. They were teachers. And it really was hard because they bought this house and were trying to fix it up. So he got a part-time job down at the gas station as a cashier. So now he's working down there part-time. Well, he must have a pretty good self-concept because it's a stretch to go from being a teacher to working at a gas station. But he can deal with it because he didn't define himself solely on the basis that he was a teacher. Well, here are steps that we can take that mitigate these losses as we age. The first thing is to deal with that trap of defining yourself by your job. Learn to be the person who has the traits that you value. And like this, if you heard the sermon here this morning, this idea that Peter denied the Lord 3 times before the cock crowed. It's not what he planned, not what he wanted, but it's human frailty. So here we are trying to, we're living a messed up life because we no longer have our job. Well, we have to look at what is it in life that we value, and what are the people who have the traits that we value. And I put down here, be like Mother Teresa. She always claimed she was a work in progress. She never said she attained. If someone would, like a reporter would ask her about the good works she was doing in Calcutta, she would never tell about them. She would just say this. She would say, come and see. Come and look. And then see if it's possible in your profession to gradually retire so it doesn't happen all at once. That works for some people. And you have these hard-won skills that you've developed in life. Let's see if you can take these skills and use them in other settings. Is it possible to reinvent yourself? Because for those of us who have worked in a job for many, many years, like, my wife was an RN for over 30 years. You can't do that unless you've developed certain kinds of discipline. And you can take those same abilities, those same disciplines, that same ability to do the things that need to be done, and you can apply it in some other area of your life besides the profession that you had. And we have to, as older folks, we need to work at keeping up our social contacts. Isolation is a terrible thing. And there have been so many studies that have shown that isolation is a factor in mortality. That if you want to live longer, don't isolate yourself. Keep up the social contacts. And of course, church is an ideal way for older people to keep up social contacts, social clubs, organizations. And it's really important as we're going to find out later, if we face living alone, that we keep those contacts going and not just agree in ourselves to be alone. We can do volunteer work. It does several things. It helps us from being depressed. It demonstrates to ourselves, and we are our biggest critics, that we are still useful. There's still things that a person can do after they're retired, no matter how old they are. And they can be organized things like in volunteer work, or it may be in private ways where you can be, where you're able to show your kindness. But we'll be spending more time on volunteer work. In fact, a whole session on volunteer work on June 18th. So our goal as a retired person is being a whole person. And isn't this true of life, that we go through life having to learn to accept our losses? You know, it's not so hard to learn to accept your gains, although sometimes that's a disaster too. You read about people who won the lottery and now they're broke because they couldn't handle it. But accepting your losses, we all have losses. We won't all win the lottery, but I guarantee that you can't live life without having loss on some level. And you can have loss just by moving. If you move from one area to another, the loss of friends, the loss of contacts, and those things. And then being able to find peace within, to be happy within yourself at that stage of life, of whatever situation you're in. And you know, I did a lot of grief counseling. And one of the things I tried to bring across was not just that grief is real, but we need to look on the other side of grief. And the other side is, rather than just lamenting the loss of your partner of so many years, but looking at the blessing of how many years you had, because that is really a great blessing. And sometimes we forget that. We take it for granted. I don't know how many older people have told me after the loss, oh, if I just realized how precious it was then, because we just took it for granted. And in every situation, always give thanks, because that's part of our nature. It is healthy for us to give thanks, and we need to give thanks, because no matter how hard you work in life, there's always God's blessing that's on top of that. And I was raised to think that, and I'm sure you were too, that if you work hard, you'll get ahead. That's not always true, I've found. I've met people who worked really hard and never got ahead. But we can get ahead in other ways besides financial ways. And you can't put a bank account on friendship and the warmth of human contact that you can build up over the years. And then finding the courage to live on, not somehow, but triumphantly. So we don't just go through life sitting on a bench in Palm Springs wishing we were back at work, but we take the reins of life in our hands and we go forward making intentional decisions on what we're going to do and how we're going to find happiness and peace within. Now, I've selected 3 people, and they're going to come and share with us now. And those 3 people all have a story to tell. And I'm going to tell, the first one is Dr. Howard. I'm going to tell his story first because he sent me a paragraph, but you know, I know his story so well. Dr. Howard was an anesthesiologist, and I met him many years ago. And I told him that, you know, he, as an anesthesiologist, just put people to sleep one at a time. But as a pastor, I could put people to sleep 100 at a time. And when Dr. Howard retired, and it's a good thing when you're an anesthesiologist to retire, because in anesthesiology, it's not like if you were an ear, nose, and throat doctor or some other specialty. You have a lot of takeoffs and landings. You've got people's lives in your hands, literally. And it's a good thing to retire, but it took skills to do what he did. And he took the skills that he developed as an anesthesiologist, and he turned himself into a businessman. And those skills were paying attention to detail, being able to evaluate and understand risks, being able to see opportunity, and of course the honesty and integrity that he developed all his life, he used that. And to say Dr. Howard is a successful businessman would be not enough. He's really been successful. So Dr. Howard, if you'd come up here and take this microphone, or you can stay there if you want to not move. I could bring the mic to you.
Well, thank you, Craig. Craig has been a great friend of mine for a long, long time. And it's hard for me to talk without saying a joke. So I'm going to start off in saying I'm 84 years old, and I was born at an early age. Okay, I am a very, very lucky person. That's because I'm married to that gal. When I was 5 years old, I knew, because my father was a chiropractor, my brother was a physician, I wanted to be a doctor. I had a great mentor. I had many jobs. I was an Eagle Scout. I got that. I was really proud of myself. And then, excuse me, in 19, I think it was, when I was 19 years old, I worked at Sequoia National Park. And one night, when I was a porter, a guy came in, a forest ranger, cut his arm almost totally off. And I wanted so much to help that person because I knew how to put a tourniquet on, I knew how to help him. And I was pushed away. And that is a turning point in my life that I decided I'm going to go back, finish my education, become a doctor. I've always wanted to be a general practitioner. I was a general practitioner in the Air Force, very proud of myself for 4 years. Then I became an anesthesiologist. I loved my job. I never felt like I had to go to work. I got to go to work because I enjoyed it so much. When I was 65, I knew it was going to happen. There was retirement was going to happen, but I did not want to quit. I worked till I was 77 years old, and I loved every second of it. The reason I stopped is because I had to have open heart surgery, and I couldn't take call anymore. So I was also simultaneously reading a book, Don't Retire, Rewire. And so I figured, what can I do to keep myself busy after I retire? Because I know I won't last for 3 years if I don't have something to do. Some of my colleagues, which you probably know, I won't mention their name, local residents, doctors, obstetricians, they died in 3 years after they retired. I was on a trip in northern United States, and I met a gentleman. He says, Kirk, for your retirement, why don't you go into self-storage business? I was really resistant. This was 1998, and I decided to go in, and I started researching. And Craig was a great asset because every morning when we'd meet together, I would tell him about my trials and tribulations. So Craig told me, he says, Kirk, are you too stubborn to go out to Banning or Beaumont and check that out? So I did. And I took some courses, like I do in anesthesiology, to keep my CMEs. And I decided, after 3 big lectures, to go in and develop it. And I have. And that's what I'm wearing right now, is my Beaumont self-storage, which I am so proud of. It's 8.5 acres, has 1,000 spots. Everybody loves my job, loves what I've done, and I really appreciate the fact that I can go out there and be proud of myself. So, as closing, I would say, just keep busy, never stop. I had a good friend, his name was Neil Baker, Baker's Burgers. He never stopped till the last day. He lived up to 92. Walt Disney, he never stopped building. And that's my goal in my life. And what Craig is saying, that's really what I am, a person that's busy and active and try to accomplish something new every day. Thank you.
If you would sit up here, please. And you wouldn't believe the size of the storage that he's built. The business, it's huge, more than a city block, and it's going really well. Our second speaker is Mark Cook, and Mark graduated from USC. He was recruited by Ford Motor Company to participate in their management trainee program. And after a few years of moving through several positions, he was asked to become a member of the startup team for a new division of Ford called the Dealer Computer Services, or DCS. The computer software programmers were in Detroit, but the marketing personnel, like Mark, were headquartered in several regional offices. As market manager, he sold the regional dealers the various software programs. Mark enjoyed his job despite the significant travel to Detroit and various dealerships throughout the western U.S. He liked the car business and helped the dealership's personnel to adapt to the new technology. Several of his DCS colleagues in the Orange County headquarters became personal friends. Ford's excellent compensation program, including generous benefits, enabled Mark and his wife to acquire real estate investments on the side, including a summer home at Lake Arrowhead that they bought to retire in one day. And that day came sooner than expected when Ford Motor Company decided to sell the DCS division. It was their only profitable entity available to sell to a Texas buyer. Mark opted out for early retirement rather than going to work for the new company. So he and his wife moved to Lake Arrowhead, but also bought a small condo near his widowed father in Palm Desert. Mark had lost a pretty good kingdom, but found a happy retirement in unexpected pursuits. Mark, would you come up and say a few words?
Thank you, Craig. I told Craig when he first asked me to speak that I didn't have too much to say. I know Redland's last 4 Men of the Year, including our own Chris Martin and Eric Grenler, have been Men of the Year, and their long and impressive lists of volunteer contributions to this community. Few of us can live up to that level of commitment. But I do think all of us can find some purpose and usefulness and reward in even small volunteer roles, and then sometimes unexpected paths they open up for us. So I agreed to share my story. I had looked forward to retiring at Lake Arrowhead, and suddenly I was there. And taking up golf, Peggy and I became decent enough golfers to enjoy organized tournaments and golf there and in Palm Desert. We didn't have grandkids. Peggy likes gardening, but not me. So golf became an important activity. The way I played, it did not provide the sense of purpose and fulfillment that a job does. But it does get you outdoors and moving and providing great opportunities for social interaction. There was an unexpected result of my newfound connection to golf. My college friend heard I was retired and down in the desert playing golf and approached me about getting involved as the manager of a nonprofit amateur golf association called the Senior Masters to help out his father, who had co-founded the group. The Senior Masters held a 72-hole championship tournament for over 200 very low handicap golfers from around the country at the Indian Wells Golf Resort every April. I handled the business aspects, banking, contracts, the host hotel, printing, memberships, applications, mailing, prizes, and planning, and hosting multiple dinners during that week. Many of the players became personal friends, and it was a wonderful part-time job for 17 years. But the best result of this was because of the Senior Masters, I was asked to volunteer and help put on several charitable golf tournaments, and most of which benefited young people in the Coachella Valley. And this also added to my social interaction. Also, as a golf tournament expert, I was nominated for the board of directors at La Quinta Country Club, which I had just moved to. Serving on that board turned into a major commitment because our clubhouse was damaged in an earthquake. We had to tear it down and rebuild a new clubhouse. Eventually, overcoming the difficult challenges of that volunteer experience provided some hard-won satisfaction. When I first retired, I had more time than I was used to, and I looked to volunteer at the Braille Institute in Rancho Mirage, and I volunteered to read to the clans. I thought maybe they needed someone to read books to. So when I got there and volunteered, they informed me no, that was something they needed, that a lot of Hollywood actors had read all the books that there were, and they really didn't need me for that. But they said, we do have an opening in a class where we bring people together, and if you'd like to hold this class, what I did was read a newspaper, and we talked about current events, and then the people in these classes could follow on the radio or listen to television. Most of the people at the Braille Institute still had some eyesight. Only 92% still had some eyesight. Only 8% were actually totally blind. The Braille Institute offered a lot of computer things to enlarge and to help people, and it actually had computers that could talk to you and tell you what was on the computer. I enjoyed that, and I did that for several years. One year, one of the paid teachers took a leave of absence to have a baby, and they asked me to teach her class. So I taught her class, which was interpersonal communications, and by the way, it helped me at home. I taught that class for 5 years, and I only quit because they changed to year-round schedule, and that didn't fit into my schedule. But I did continue volunteering to help with the planning and hosting of the annual fundraiser lunch. I also served on the board of directors, where I was able to encourage new volunteers to join our program. Just offering to read to the blind opened a rewarding volunteer experience and connections that I relish today. 5 years ago, when we moved to Redlands, one of the first things I did was to sign up for the adult literacy program at the Smiley Library, where I've since taught 2 adult men to read and write, so one of them could get a job and the other could keep his job. And I said yes to Ted Lyford when he asked me to be an usher here. I know firsthand the benefits of just putting yourself out there, giving purpose to your life after you've retired or changed what you're doing. I think helping others, and perhaps this can also enrich your life. So I encourage you, if you're able, to please volunteer and help other people.
Thank you. If you could sit there, thank you.
Thanks, Don.
And we're going to have a whole session on volunteering coming up. So the next speaker is Joe Freeman. He graduated from the University of Minnesota with a degree in aeronautical engineering. He moved to California to work in the aerospace industry. He got a master's degree in fluid mechanics and a master's degree in business. After 15 years in various jobs in engineering at Douglas Aircraft, which is now part of Boeing, he was promoted to Chief Design Engineer for the DC-9 family of aircraft operated by airlines all over the world. Joe left Douglas to represent the airlines in Washington, D.C. as Vice President of Engineering at the Airport Transport Association, and he testified before Congress a number of times. After a couple of years in Washington, D.C., and 2 years as president of an aircraft repair company in New York, he was recruited to be Vice President of Engineering, Training, and Inspection at Northwest Airlines back in Minnesota, where it was still cold in the winter. After Northwest, Joe was Senior Vice President of Customer Support for Fairchild Dornier, a regional aircraft manufacturer with offices in San Antonio, Texas, and Germany. Joe then returned to California to work as General Manager of an aircraft repair company in Victorville. Joe is retired with his wife, Lynette, in Apple Valley. Joe?
Thank you, Greg. You left off that office that was in Oberpfaffenhofen, Germany.
I didn't want to say it.
You didn't want to say it. I understand, and I just want to say my shirt and your shirt, we should have coordinated on this a little bit better. That is beautiful. There's three things that I learned that I did that really helped me with this loss of kingdom and retirement. The first one is staying mentally active, challenging yourself. One of the things that happened to me, I don't know if I planned this or not, was in 2015, I gave up years of experience with HP computers and Windows operating systems and all of that, and I bought myself a MacBook Pro. And I remember a daughter-in-law saying, "Why are you doing that? Do you know how hard that's going to be to change over to that operating system?" And it was. But the ability that Apple had to curate and handle photos was what I was after. And with 11 grandkids and one great-granddaughter, all those photos was an important aspect. So I then got an iPhone, gave up my Android, and again, you have that challenge. And you know that you've achieved some sort of capability in this area. You want to put up that picture for me? When our 21-year-old, maybe she's 22 now, granddaughter says, "Hey, you showed me something new on my iPhone," right? Whoa, what a compliment to some old guy that learned how that system works. And that's our great-granddaughter, and I'm busy teaching her FaceTime. And she's only a year and a half old, but she gets it, she loves it, and of course it benefits us because we get to FaceTime with her a lot. That's the first thing. What was the second thing? You can put the picture down if you want. The second thing is staying physically active, and that's different for everybody. I'm not trying to compete with Craig. I just wouldn't do that. But it is important to stay physically active, and I've been working on that. We all have our losses, our limitations. So I can't do the 200 butterfly like he can, because when I throw my arms up like that, I have no tendons in this shoulder. They all got damaged. After about 2 strokes, my neck goes into a cramp, and I'm headed for the bottom of the pool. But that doesn't mean that I can't work to my capability and deal with my limitations. It helps you sleep, it improves your circulation, and experts, not me, will tell you that you need to stay balanced. You need to learn how to balance. You need to learn to build your core strength. You need to learn how to build your aerobic capability. The last one is social interactions and social connections with people. And just in case you're thinking that I was able to put this talk together by myself, there's an app now called AI Chat. You've heard of artificial intelligence, and it's right here. And I could just say to it, I guess it's not listening, so I can say it, what are the 3 most important things about aging? And it came up with these 3 things. Now, I don't just believe everything I see on the internet. I got to check this out and make sure it's right. But those social interactions are really, really important. And it can be at a church like this. It can be at a club. It can be at a golf course. Or it can be just the person that's selling you the sushi at your local sushi place that gets to know you. And you get to know them. And they can say to you, hey, I like your vibe. I like the way you're doing things, right? Those opportunities are everywhere. And like Pastor John was talking about this morning, when Jesus looked into the eyes of Peter, that's the connection. Look at people, look into their eyes, try to understand where they're at, where they're coming from. That's a really important aspect, and it's very rewarding. You'll find some of the nicest, most wonderful people that way. Thank you.
Okay, if you'd have a seat there. All right, now we're going to have opportunity to ask questions from any of us. And Sean, if you could run the mic around. We just ask that you speak into the mic because there are other people watching who otherwise they won't hear you.
Oh, you said one up there.
All right.
Or no,
I'm going to have
yeah, you'll have that one. Does anybody have any questions? They covered everything. Comments, that's another one.
Yeah, comments are fine.
You have one?
Or you share your own experience.
Yeah, I'm a retired police officer and served 4 years in the Armed Forces, and I lost a lot of my buddies in Vietnam, and I don't know what I'm trying to say here. I'm pretty competitive. I did triathlons for years. I still ride mountain bikes all over the world, but what you say really hits me. But my kids are worried about me. I lost my wife after 57 years, and I'm not going to fool around that. That was I was supposed to go before her because I was set up for ambushes several times working with Riverside PD, and so some of my buddies are gone. But I learned a lot from vets, and I probably talking like I did at teaching. I've taught at academies all over the country, and I taught street survival, not to trust any human being. And the more religious you are, you can't come in my squad car, be on my bike, because you're not going to rely. You say your prayers before you leave, because when we hit the streets, you're going to get shot at. And here I'm at a weird time in my life. I just want one of my kids. You just won't die. But like you said, I'm planning a trip to Australia to ride across Australia. But losing my wife was a tough thing. But she warned me about certain things, and I was statistically never supposed to make it. And I took high-risk jobs, and if I said my prayers, it would be in the squad room before I took off. And I don't know if anybody's grasping what I'm trying to say is that you don't give up, but I don't worry about tomorrow. And I had a wonderful wife. That killed me. And that I turned against God and wasn't an atheist, but any of you guys here think you're pretty macho. I came out of the war. I was in actually full-blown shootouts. And it was a thrilling thing for me to be in a shootout. That may sound weird, but the movies were just me. And I was on movie sets. I don't know why I'm here, but if there is a God, he better talk to me pretty soon, because my son and are great people, but they see things I didn't. I guess that the only thing I'm talking to guys here, especially because women have a little bit more common sense than men do. We have our macho-ness and stuff, even you guys, and you know what I'm talking about. So if anybody's got any ideas here to help me, because I had to get rid of this, not arrogance, but I survived. And 90% of my buddies are dead. Only one guy's alive, and he's hidden way up in Tehachapi. And he became chief of police, and he's the only guy I really can talk to, because I don't like to be told everything's going to be okay, because it's not. It's going to be one hard battle, guys. The women seem to have it, but after I lost my wife, I never want to go through that again, and I went through that phase. I never want to fall in love with anybody again, because it was a killer. And I thought I was pretty tough, but I don't know if anybody got any ideas, but losing her was it. And I think that was the most difficult time. If I can't say enough, you think you're pretty strong. I did. I was physically fit. I raced bicycles, and I was into martial arts and all that stuff. But I don't know. I stay close to God. I say my prayers every day. And I don't know if you understand what I'm talking about, but when I was teaching at academies and from all over the country, I told guys, never give up. And that's the only reason I'm here, is because my kids see something I don't see. And I wasn't arrogant, but I just being alone and losing her after that many years. If there is a God, I have no use for him, because I've been in situations where babies died right in front of me.
Yeah.
So if anybody's got any, if you've ever seen a SID baby or babies in front of you, I've spent a lot of my career in ER rooms. And when I left there and I had to deal with screaming parents, and I didn't, I was just a young guy. I said, you're going to face this.
Could I speak with you afterwards?
Oh, yeah.
Because you are just what I'm looking for. All right. Someone else have a question, comment, share an experience?
As most of you know me, I'm not afraid to walk up to people and greet them. But first saying, how are you? And I'm Carol. What do you say after that? So much has been in my life of who I am as a business person. And that's most of the reason why people know me. And if I go somewhere and don't know someone or know their face, I don't feel empty, but I go, well, why am I here?
Well, you're using some of the good things that made you a good business person. Yeah. All right.
I'm curious to know, all four of you have had careers and have had a fairly high status in your positions. And then when you retire, that status, the way society views you, is gone, and you're basically just who you are, as Pastor Craig was saying. And I was wondering how you dealt with that different feeling of, a different stature.
Well, let me answer that to start with, and I'll pass the mic to the other speakers. I had the fortune of having many experiences in life. I didn't just start out as a pastor. I started out as a wiener hanger in a sausage factory. And if you've been a wiener hanger in a sausage factory, you can adapt to anything, because that is really, I don't know if they still have wiener hangers because it's probably all automated, but I would take 40 pounds of wieners that were all connected together, and I'd hold them with one arm, and I'd stick the pole into the other one, and I'd have to hold up the 40 pounds with the left hand and grab the other end with the right hand, and then raise them up and put them on the truck that was overhead on rails, put them on the truck, and then they would be wheeled into the oven. And then I did a whole lot of other things in life before. You know, I didn't go to seminary until I was 35. So having had many, and I was in the fire department as a volunteer from 1958 almost continuously until 2016. So I had a lot of different experiences, and that's why, to me, I was able to shed that aurora of being pastor and just be me.
Yeah, that's a real interesting question. I had a lot of help from my wife, Lynette. The job I had was, fly first class, your secretary takes care of your hotel reservations, all that kind of good stuff. I was over in Germany. Oberpfaffenhofen is just outside of Munich, and our son and his wife, one son and his wife, my wife came over, and we spent 2 weeks driving around Europe. And so, I just said, gee, I need a trip like this, and they fix up the hotels and rental cars and, all that kind of good stuff. So you're living, I don't know, on a cloud or something like that, I guess. Well, the first time I retired, this was in San Antonio, Texas, I was home, and I was working at home. I had, consulting job and stuff like that. And I looked at my watch, and it was about 11:53, and I walked out, and I said, gee, it's about time for lunch, isn't it? And she said something like, if you want to eat, you better fix it, because I'm going out in the garden, right? So you recalibrate yourself, and I think in the end, you're not disappointed by not having all that power and all that kind of good stuff. It's replaced. Those things are replaced by your interactions with people primarily. You're dealing with people in a whole different way. And when you get kind of crossways with something, the thing I ask myself is, why do I feel this way? Why am I feeling this way? What's causing me to act like this? Why can't I be a better person? So, thank you.
I think it is a hard thing when you leave your job, particularly if you liked it. I like my work with Ford Motor Company, and a lot of people don't know it is still a family company. So when I left Ford, I had a lot of time on my hands. Unfortunately, I'd always wanted to, but didn't have time to volunteer. And I started volunteering and meeting people, and it really filled up the loss of kingdom for me, and I don't regret it, and I recommend to anyone that is looking to fill some time to volunteer if you can, and I think it'll enrich you personally.
Kind of a departing thought is something I was aware of about 2 years ago. And it's something that's called the Blue Zone. 5 areas in the United States where people live to 90 to 100 years of age. It starts over in Okinawa, in Sardinia, Costa Rica, Loma Linda, and in Greece. And what it is these people have an association like we have here in the church. They also have a reason to get up early in the morning and be active. They also eat a vegetarian diet. And you can look this up. Google Blue Zones. It's really simple, and it's a basic, great idea.
Okay, last call for comments, questions.
I'd like to make some comments on this. I think all of us at a certain stage in life say, okay, is this the high point or is it going to be downhill? And are we still useful in church? Are they still going to ask us to serve on a committee? How long can we still do it without having someone say, she should have retired? And I think that we need to look at that. And I've worked with a lot of older people, and it's been wonderful to see keeping going and keeping contributing well into the 90s. I think that if I can keep my train of thought going on this whole thing, you have to just think, okay, I can keep doing this, and even though you've lost your kingdom, you have lost these friends. You reach a point where you say, all right, I've reached this age of wisdom. I'm going to speak up. No matter whether you want to hear what I'm going to say, I want to say it. And then I realize I'm getting a little crotchety, and who's going to want to be around me? And so you reach a stage where you say, all right, is this new computer learning that you talked about, is that worth it, or should I let the young people come over and take over and do it? So it's, I don't know what age you're going to reach it, but that's on my mind right now. Can I stop being crotchety that this is the way you should dress, and you guys aren't dressing this way anymore? Or is this the new way in life, and we need to accept? So it's a balancing point in there.
May I say something? Is that okay? So I think, next to Hallie, I'm the youngest person in the room.
Yeah, Sean's only 29.
No, I'm 39. I wish I was 29. Shoot. The only thing I wanted to say, I don't think that you probably very frequently hear from my generation at 39. And I think as I listen to you all share about the loss of kingdom that you're experiencing or have experienced, the thing I want to share with you as a 39-year-old is that you add deep value to my life. And so as you're sorting out what life looks like today, I don't want you to lose sight of the impact and value you have on younger generations. I value your stories, and I value your life experiences. And sometimes it's like going to what Nelda said, should I speak up? Should I not speak up? Please speak up. I need to hear it. I think, especially in my generation, we're looking for things that are stable. We're looking for experience and wisdom. And my assumption is you all have that by a lot. You've faced things that we're just now facing in our lives, and you've walked through it. You've seen the long history of walking through difficult and even fun things. So I just wanted to encourage you all, as someone from a different generation, is that you have deep value, and I'm glad that you're in our lives. So thank you.
Okay.
Who really had a lot to say, and I was sort of ostracized out of the group of cops I work with because we were handled some really crazy cases. But I wish I had senior groups like this, because we had a senior center in town, Plymouth Towers, and seniors had a tough time. But I got a lot of slack from my buddies. But I'm only here because of my son and his family. But you know, sometimes I have to shake them up. I said, dude, I've been down that road. I said, I've lost more friends than you have relatives. I mean, yeah. And I'm still here, but my wife and I had humility is the biggest thing for guys. And I'm telling you right now, even you guys sitting up there, it says, you know, when you go home, it's I don't know if I make sense or not, but it's not a complicated answer. You know, God will help you, but, you know, right now we're in this shootout, and I got to depend on you, buddy. And I'm here because of my son, Aaron. He comes to this church, and I had to humble myself. It wasn't easy, because when I lost my wife, boy, I tell you, I wanted nothing to do with any kind of divine thing.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you this, for the ladies, I still fight it.
Yeah.
And I pray every day. And it's, we can sit here and say everything's going to be okay, but
Yeah.
I repeated myself at police academies to cops,
Yeah.
and coming out of that background. But doctors, I work with a lot of physicians at ER rooms, and I had to help them, and some of them were cracking up. So if you've got any questions, I'll answer them, but I don't know if I got the answer.
Yeah, I need to see after July 2nd, we're having a whole session on volunteering. I need you to think about that and prepare what you know about volunteering and share it with us, because we're going to be talking about specific volunteering opportunities in our community. And there are lots of things that we've never, we all don't know all the opportunities. There are a lot of things. Kirk was driving a cart around the racetrack as a volunteer. So there are all kinds of crazy things that you can do. So this kind of wraps it up for today. And we're going to continue, then follow the schedule. And over here we have the whole schedule printed out, and this is up to date because it changes, so always get the new one. And we have the notes from last week, so if you weren't here last week, you can come and get last week's notes. And we're going to do that each time. So out of the 10 sessions, even if you miss, you can come and get the notes afterwards. All right, I want to thank our speakers for their contribution. They're all different. And I want to thank Sean for all the footwork and putting this together for us. And thank you for coming.